Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of How to Scale an Agency. I'm on with Chad Sakonchick and his company, BetterLegal. I'm bringing him on the show because I've been following his Twitter for a while now, and I was really impressed with how they've moved everything onto Bubble, and they're doing no-code development for their software to basically try to be a competitor to a company like LegalZoom to help companies and agencies get their business started faster and more compliantly. So thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start off right at the beginning. So you mentioned to me at the beginning when you hopped on this before that we started recording here that you transferred from a custom environment to something no code. What forced you or wanted you to make that transition? What was the main reason?
The cost of development was just going up and things were getting slower. Well, our bubble version is what I actually call BL4, so Better Legal 4. And the very, very first version of BetterLegal was just a type form being pumped into Asana via Zapier, and then legal documents being generated by WebMerge, which is now FormStack.
Yeah.
And that was the entire stack. So we really started no code, but it was like before no code was a buzzword or a thing. It was just, Zapier released multi-step zaps, which made them more than just, trigger an action. You could actually do a lot of things and, put code in between. So I started with my co-founder who was an attorney, and we were just trying to find a faster way to get this done. And so we started with that system, and then we basically swapped out Asana for Salesforce, which essentially you could argue that Salesforce was the first real no-code tool, because there were just so many companies that do not build their own CRMs. They don't build their own systems. They buy Salesforce and then customize Salesforce. So anybody that says that no code is not going to go mainstream just has to look at Salesforce's market cap of multi billions of dollars and see that it already has. No code is not becoming popular. It has been popular with large companies for a very long time. So that was BetterLegal 2.0. Problem with Salesforce is that it's just really, really, really expensive. And we wanted to allow customers to log in and see their own information and interact with us through a dashboard. And so we created these grand plans, and I hired some people off of Upwork, front end and back end developer, and we spent about 9 months developing what was essentially BL3 or BetterLegal 3. Then we started migrating people from the Salesforce account, and at the time there were only a few thousand people, if even that we had helped form their businesses. And so then we ran BL3 for a really, really long time. And in January, I did this thing called Build Sell 30.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
I don't know how popular it still is. I think there's still a Discord group, but I'm not seeing as much stuff now. But I did that, and I was like, let me develop my own app. So I took the Bubble interactive course, which is bubble.io/lessons, which is the best way to start, because you can actually do some things and build these mini little apps, build your own little Google Maps pinpoint thing where it gets the address, or pull data from a Spotify playlist. So you actually get to see these kind of hello world things immediately. And back in the day, people used to write a whole hello world thing just to see hello world, and now in a matter of 10 minutes you can put together a Google Maps app and do much more complex things. But it really gives you the idea of oh my God, I can really do this really cool stuff in a couple of minutes. So then I built out this other product that is still evolving, called Trade Beacons. So if anybody's a stock trader, it's just TradeBeacons, tradebeacons.com. And so I built that as my Build Sell 30 90-day or 30-day project. And the whole goal was just, okay, well, can I build something that people can use myself without any help.
Right.
And so I bought a course from two gentlemen named Kieran and Pablo. They've got I think it's called the some kind of bubble crash course, something on Gumroad. And I basically listened to that at like 1.5 or 2x. And I spent about 10 hours watching their videos and going through and doing things as they, kind of narrated. And, I think my experience in having custom code development previously really kind of opened my eyes to say, like, okay, the hardest stuff for development is not the back end stuff. It's always the front end stuff. It's always how things look, the interactivity with the user, setting up someone's account, the registration process, the login process, the forgot password process, all of these things that are just foundational elements that you have to build from scratch. And so you have to do all of this work just to get to the start line. Whereas with Bubble, it's that all that stuff is built in. And so you just say, register, email, password, boom, it's done. And so it automatically understands these elements that are just core functionality. And then you can develop anything else that you want on top of that. And so I spent 30 days on this project. And I remember it was really like 2 5-hour sprints, call it, or just where I sat down and did it kind of live. And I did like a YouTube stream after I had watched these videos. And again, I watched them at like 2x because it was really, I had understood the idea of development. I just really needed to know how the UI was laid out in Bubble and how things interacted with each other, how they named different things. So, a table in a normal database is a data type in Bubble. So just understanding these things and how they work. But I got something basic, stood up, and I was like, this is it. Like, okay, I'm spending, $8,000 to $10,000 a month on part-time developers.
Right.
And, my business is bleeding money and we need to get to profitability. And the market was just starting to turn. And so the idea was, all right, we got to get rid of these developers. And the developers happen to be Russian developers. So Upwork had already said, these contracts you have with these developers are going to go away at such and such a time in the future. You can't hire any new Russian developers right now, but at this point in time in the future, we're just going to cease the contract anyway. So my developers, whether I liked it or not, were automatically already on the way out.
Yeah.
And so I found a Bubble developer that was fantastic, and I've been working with ever since. And we've just been building like mad, but also working with an existing backend developer that we have. And so the Bubble developer is the front end developer, and then still having a back end developer to do like custom plugins and things like that, to develop core functionality that we still need. Like there still is no really good complex Stripe plugin. And so we developed that kind of externally. We use Twilio chat very, very religiously every day. And so we've, outside of BetterLegal, we've developed a plugin for that. And so we're rebuilding the entire system. But not only that, we're removing these ancillary pieces to bring everything in-house. And what I mean by that is the very first thing we did was just kind of duplicate the existing system that we had and then do a nightly sync. So people were still going to the website and buying from the old system. And then on a nightly basis, it would pump into the new system. And then, so we had people using both systems. And then we kind of just removed access for our team on the old system. So they had to use the new system. And so we've been kind of like slowly doing these things. Then we finally, after having used Typeform for 5+ years, if not 6 years, and Typeform having not added almost any functionality in 6
Right.
years. I think they've added like a Calendly plugin.
Yeah.
They still can't do auto complete addresses. They can't allow me to pull data from an external account in a form within conditional logic. So there's all this stuff that Typeform just was lacking. And for years, we wanted to rebuild the form for Typeform, but it was just so much other stuff that was like core to our efficiency that had to get done. We never got to do that. So now we've launched into our own form and rebuilt the payment process. And just as of this morning, actually, we've moved everybody to the new form and the new payment process. And there are glitches here and there, like, okay, is the Google Ads pixel firing on purchases? And so we're kind of running around with our hair on fire a little bit, because this is like the final step in moving everything over. But yeah, we've also just gotten rid of Asana. So we rebuilt Asana within BetterLegal, so we can do task management. So in the old system, we had BL3, which was what people use to get in and manage the filings in the app, but also where our customers logged in to see the status and make changes and do all that stuff. Then we had Asana, which is the task management. So anything that needed to get done was assigned to somebody. So that was a second system. Then there was Typeform. That's what system pumped it into the system. So that was how customers got into our system. And then there's Twilio Chat. So that's another system. And then there's Google Sheets and Docs, where all the documentation and all that other stuff is. And Zapier uses a lot of that stuff to, like, through the processes, go check to see what is the state filing fee for New Hampshire, what is the turnaround time for this. And so there's just all of this web of stuff in all of these different systems that anybody that is a contractor for BetterLegal, actually doing a filing or customer experience type stuff, have to go to all these different places, which just was awful. And so now we're slowly bringing everything in and starting to fold things on top of each other to where the limitations are being just kind of unshackled with us. Where, when someone purchases now, we're like, okay, well, we're not using Asana anymore because we have Asana with our own system. Well, why don't we just make every single purchase a series of tasks? Because previously it was just like, oh, when it gets into this status, do this, and then move to the next status, and then some automations would fire, and then you got to do this, and you got to do this. So now we can say, okay, well, let's just make tasks part of the core thing, so people know exactly what they need to do, and it's attached to the org. Instead of Asana being a separate system and BL3 being a separate system, you couldn't connect the two of them. Now, since it's together, we can say, like, to the contractor doing the filing, we can say, here's all of your tasks in one area, and all you have to do is check them off one by one. But then we're also developing things like, in our specific business, you have to, we have bots that will auto file for us. So in different states, for Texas, for example, is a high volume state, we don't do the filings. We push a button and it goes and it does the filing automatically. It opens up a headless browser, does the filing and does that. So there's no human errors for those heavy volume filings. But on lower volume, say it's Maine or Nebraska or Hawaii or something, they're still on, Maine is paper filing, surprisingly, but on other lower volume states, there's an actual form. And so we've got instructions on click here, do that. So anybody that hasn't done it in a while, or even if I get on or I give you the task to do it, there are instructions that tell you exactly how to file, what to put in what, field, et cetera, et cetera. So now we're building this thing that is essentially like a page that allows you to see the instructions in the right pane. And in the left 3/4 of the page lets you see the state website. So you can see the instructions and the state website on the same place, copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. So there's just so many things that we're now doing with Bubble and bringing everything in-house. Documentation and spreadsheets are now being brought in-house so people can link to stuff and it all exists in one system. So if we bring in a new person, we can just say, here's your access to BetterLegal's internal app, and that's all you need. and all the instructions, all the processes, all the buttons to generate, automations and stuff all exist here instead of in 15 different places.
That's interesting. So I think one of the things that, because I know we both have a lot of experience now on Bubble. I've spent, I think over the last 18 months, probably 4,000 hours just developing on Bubble. And I'm really curious how your process goes for iterating on new, features. So for instance, what I've actually started doing is we got to a certain point where like now the demand is there and people are paying us a lot for it, but the every time we have a new feature, we kind of want to go build that feature instead of like perfect the new one. And so one thing I've started to do recently is I'll just go and look through all the Hotjar recordings, and if there's errors, then I won't move on to the new feature until like every single error is like resolved. There's no problems. And I'm curious, like, do you guys follow a similar pattern of I guess feature development where you will only move on to a new feature if like all the problems with the previous feature are resolved, or do you typically have like multiple features in development at a time and you're mainly focused on just speed, knowing that maybe if there's some errors, it won't be a huge issue? Or for you, how do you approach it?
Yeah, sadly, it's the latter,
Yeah.
mainly because we've been having, we had this app, this custom coded app that had been
Yeah.
in development for 4 years. And then in
Yeah.
the last 8 months or 9 months, we've had to copy all of the functionality, including
Right.
more than 150 Zapier automations and all of this other stuff, and basically having to rebuild it over here and then migrate it and sync it and do all this stuff. So right now we're still very much just trying to get it's almost like, it's 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, but then like
Yeah.
going the right direction, like going down the wrong path, and then having to backtrack a little bit to get back to, the juncture. So then you can go on the right path. So that's kind of what we had to do. But in the process, we've also, like I said, we've removed some things. So like, for example, like I said, with the Asana thing, having that externally was a massive headache.
Right.
A lot of things got lost, and it was costing us $350 a month. And so we just said, okay, well, can we just rebuild this? And so we found a company that has like templates for this stuff, and we just subscribed to their template and brought it in house. So it's now a template that is now ours that we customized.
Right.
But that was something that was just why are we paying these other people to do it when we can do it ourselves? And so a lot of the feature development lately has been, what are we paying a third party service to do that we can actually do in house and bring our SaaS costs down? Once we get finished with a lot of that, which we're almost done with, we still have the Twilio and the chat and phone and stuff like that we need to develop. But other than that, yeah, from now moving forward for the next, I would say for the rest of the year, it's very much going to be removing errors from the customer experience through, we use Inspectlet, same thing, we use Inspectlet. But then also, what is making our team's life difficult? What can we do to make our team twice as productive with less hours? So then we can scale. So if we add another, 500 LLCs a month to our sales, we don't have to hire that many more people, if any. And so, so it's, I would say at some point you kind of have to, if you're starting from scratch, I think, do the bare amount of functionality and move slowly. But sometimes if you got to play catch up and you're rebuilding something, copying something that exists and having to duplicate it, you can't, you can't move that slowly. You kind of have to build all at once very quickly. So.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, how do you, just to kind of like tie it all together for agencies who might be listening to the show, how do you help, like, let's say an agency, for instance, they want to use this or they want to launch their agency? Like, what's the unique or different experience for your software than using something like Stripe Atlas or using something like LegalZoom?
Yeah. So speaking of Stripe Atlas only exists in Delaware.
Oh,
So
okay.
if
Good
you
to know.
live in Texas or Nebraska or Florida or California, you cannot use Stripe Atlas.
Right.
It's now if you want to do, there are complexities. You can go to Better Legal's YouTube channel, see about what a domestic versus foreign LLC in. But generally, if you are living and working in a state, you should not be. And I'm not a lawyer, so don't quote me, but you should not be doing a Delaware LLC or corporation,
Yeah.
because you have to do it there, and then you'd have to also do one in your state. So anyway, so that's why Stripe Atlas is not. Stripe Atlas is really developed for people that are outside the U.S.
Right.
to, like, that's what Stripe is trying to do, is trying to open up the amount of entrepreneurs that are globally that can work in the U.S. and develop software for the U.S. But like LegalZoom, I would say, we've actually hired and fired 4 different people that worked at LegalZoom that
Oh,
came
really?
and worked for us. And frankly, they are just bloated with middle management that doesn't do anything. We had a guy that came in and we were on a Google Meet, and he could not use a shared Google sheet.
Yeah.
He just could not figure out how it worked. And we're like, how are you the head of sales? And now he works for another one of our competitors. So he's middle management there, kind of hiding out probably. But yeah, they're like a big cargo ship that's moving in a direction, and they've developed processes over time. And at some point, I kind of have a philosophy that every now and again you just kind of have to throw everything out and start from scratch, or else you're
Right.
just bolting on and bolting on and bolting on, and you're making decisions based on things that aren't relevant anymore.
Yeah.
So, like I said recently, we've been, now that we're not using Asana externally, we've got it internally. We don't have to do this like weird pipeline change status thing that moves everything through the process. We can be much more nimble and completely change the process. But people
Yeah.
haven't really been able to get their head around that, because they think that, well, this is the process, and this process was developed for this reason. So
Right.
LegalZoom just, they're a public company now, and they're just trying to squeeze every single dollar out of every single person. And so
Right.
the easy math to do is, when you have a company that has hundreds or thousands of employees, they have to feed all of those people.
Right.
There are people that are doing development, people doing customer service. There are people that are doing legal. There are people doing HR. There are people doing, events. There are people doing social. There are all of these people that are doing all of this stuff. And there's that many mouths to feed. And so they have to figure out how can they get the most amount of money per customer.
Right.
Whereas a small company like us that is using no code, and I've been really harping this on Twitter lately, is if you've got a small group of people, we have probably a dozen or less than a dozen people that work with us. And only a very small amount of them I would consider full time. There are just less mouths to feed. And so we can charge less, we can be more nimble. You can serve more customers at a lower price point, at a better service. We go as fast as the state. So if Texas is 2 days, it's 2 days. If New York is 1 day, it's 1 day. Whereas LegalZoom charges you their amount. We charge $299 with no other of the weird baubles or upsells or whatever. LegalZoom charges, I think, $149 is their base. But then if you want it in less than 30 business days, not 30 calendar days, 30 business days, you have to pay either another $100 or $150 for the rush service. It's not that the state is taking that amount of time. It's that they're just not getting to it yet because you didn't pay more. So after you start adding on, oh, I need an EIN. Oh, I need legal documents. Oh, I need it in less than 30 business days. I want it in 7 to 10 business days, which is like their fastest turnaround. You're now paying $700-800 plus to get the same service that we provide for faster at the $299 price point.
Right. That's really interesting.
I would just say that that's for any business. Like your advantage, I have a strong belief that in the next 5 or 10 years, as no code, develops and continues to evolve, that the smaller companies that are just getting started now that start on no code will be able to really upend and disrupt much larger companies because they just don't have the amount of people. And, every node you add to the game of telephone makes it more complex and slows you down further.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally get it. And for everybody listening to the show, Chad's business, BetterLegal, if you go to their website, betterlegal.com, you can use their service if you're thinking about launching a new business or you're thinking about getting your agency set up. If you're the freelancer and you want to launch an agency, feel free to go to his website. Is there any other way that they can get in touch with you?
I'll give you a coupon code so you can link to it in the show notes, and people can get $100 off. So it's actually $199.
Perfect.
And the only reason we charge $299 is because Google and Facebook charge so much to run ads.
Right.
So it would be less expensive if we didn't have to compete with people like LegalZoom who run up the cost of that first or second ad.
Yeah.
It's so expensive. So
100%. Well, it's been great having you on the show, man. It's really interesting. I know, I wanted to have a lot more SaaS founders on the show because a lot of agencies want to launch SaaS products. And so they want to hear how they're doing. They want to know what it's like, and then they want to go and launch something of their own. So for everybody listening, they're building a competitor to LegalZoom. They have some really distinct offers, some really interesting stuff. Again, remember, all transition from custom to bubble, which is a pretty difficult transition, but they've made it work, and we're excited to see the progress. So thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.